Good morning, wherever you may be residing here today, though. Great to see all of us here just joining us. My name is Josh Levitan. I'm the senior instructor over at Cyber Trading University, CTU, for that matter. Thank you so much to the fine folks over at Bookmap, Bruce, Dan, Steven, all of them over there. Thank you so much for allowing me to present on here today. Great to have all of our members here, at least just joining us, though, a moment ago. Give me a quick chat, though, at least in Discord, as well as on social, if you got me here loud and clear. And as you do that, I want to go over a couple quick housekeeping notes to begin. We'll get things kicked off here in just a quick second. But for anyone that's unfamiliar with Cyber Trading University, myself, Josh Levitan here, I've been trading alongside 36+ year pro Fausto Pugliese. Myself, I've been doing it for about 12+ years. So we mainly day trade small cap equities, and we also tend to swing trade the larger caps, though, too. So myself, I've had a big focal point on some of the larger cap tech stocks over the last recent years. I'm sure like a lot of us, perhaps, Tesla, AMD, recently Palantir, and we're going to go over a couple of those, but we're also going to go over a couple of different smaller cap trades. I know that Bookmap hosts a wide variety of different great educators out there that cater to both. So if you're familiar with a few of these different tickers we're about to go over, perfect. I want you to, because we're going to have the chance to go over real strategy and real execution here. Now, if you're looking to learn more about how to find Cyber Trading University, whether it be myself, Fausto Pugliese, all of us here as a collective, go right to YouTube. We host our own channel right there, Cyber Trading U, as well as on X/Twitter, and our website, cybertradinguniversity.com. We do invite you to join our live trading room at the end of this presentation. Just a couple of quick general disclosure notes. First and foremost, hypothetical performance results may have inherent limitations, some of which are described below, so on and so forth. A lot of fine print, right? Hey, we got to get it in, though. And with that said, though, real quick, couple last things before we jump into it. Just, I know a lot of us have already been verified at this point for the Bookmap Discord, but if you haven't had the chance to do so, scan that QR code right there with your phone, with your camera, or you can go right to the link right there, discord.gg/bookmap. I'll untie my tongue as I do that. But without further ado, I do want to show this, though. Hashtag free blue jacket. There is a huge challenge competition ahead, and you're going to have the chance to win a nice little prize there. How about that? That nice Bookmap blue hoodie. I know that Fausto has one of those as well. I want to show this here actually just as we kick things off. So that's exactly this trade competition here for the most part. You have actually $600 in Bookmap prizes ahead here for you. So again, make sure that you get involved. Go right down to the Bookmap link right there in the Discord chat, bookmap.com/blue jacket to get yourself involved. It has all of the instructions down here below. But again, $600 worth of total Bookmap prizes in the subscriptions. You get the little hoodie as well. But otherwise, folks, we have a lot to dig into here. So I want to rip right into, personally, and not to talk selfishly here, this might be my best swing trade ever, this IBRX. And in terms of percentage, in terms of conviction, now this doesn't always happen, where you tend to have something just fall right into your lap, basically screaming, hey, make money on me. I want you to buy me right now. It's the perfect time right now. Do it. So here's what happened. And with this stock, IBRX, this really initially kicked off as a day trade stock. To me, no-name company, to me, a small cap company. But I guess they were pushing up back in the beginning of January. And it was really on the 13th, the 14th here it was, that we first started to see news out on this company. They're a pharma company, and what happened was they ended up actually getting FDA fast track approval from the Saudi government regarding their drug Anktiva. And this is meant to treat two separate types of cancers. Non-small cell lung cancer, as well as bladder cancer as well. So when it comes to day trading these stocks, the pharmaceutical companies, you can't trust them as far as you could throw them. If they are at phase 2 of their testing, they still have a long ways to go to get to phase 3, let alone FDA approval. So long story short, to begin with, normally don't trust these stocks. But when you hear that any country, any governmental, regulatory body ends up giving full FDA approval, okay, well, that's the end of the roadmap pretty much, right? Just a matter of selling the damn thing. So with that alone got me convicted to try this trade out. Now, hey, between you and me, it's not US FDA fast track approval, but it's Saudi, and Saudi's got a lot of money. So, let's be unbiased there, right? This is huge news regarding a drug that treats two separate types of cancer, and it's the Saudi government. They got tons of money to blow on this. Well, with that, that's where we jumped in as a day trade, but using Bookmap, we ended up making this a really strong swing trade. So the first post that I had on this trade was really when it took off, but I noticed that we didn't really see too many larger orders out there at the time, at least not until 10 bucks. This screenshot was taken back on January 15th. So, just over a month ago, pretty much, right? Now, granted, when you zoom in on Bookmap, you kind of zoom in here on the price axis, time axis, you're going to see this thicken in a little bit. You're going to see start to see some orders around 450, 5 bucks. Those are for about 140, 108,000 shares. But what if it breaks that? Now, what if it really breaks that? You know what I mean? Well, your next larger order from January 15th was not until 10 bucks, and it was a 500,000 share seller. So, hey, is it really going to make that push immediately there? Probably not. But that's just where otherwise it gives you a good target to work with at first. Now, on this trade, for as much as it went up from even here, let alone here, but we started following it, and I'm in right now on the top right of my screen, 3 bucks. But to have it go from 3 all the way to even 6 in just 2 days, it's pretty impressive, even if the news is that good. Normally, you're going to see consolidation. You're going to see at least the stock pull back. It's not going to offer you as much. Now, on this trade, what happened was on the 20th, I think here it was, on the 20th going into the afternoon, here another screenshot just to show for right now, just as this was from a month ago. So on the 20th in the afternoon, we ended up seeing a couple of new sell orders pop up. That's something that's going to greatly weigh the stock down for the time being. So at 8 bucks, you had about 262,000 out there, and then at 705, 710, whatever this is here, about 323,000. So that was going into the afternoon on the 20th. I'd expect this to weigh this down for the afternoon. Now, ultimately, in hindsight, long story short, looks like it did break over 8 here, though. It actually pushed back up a couple of days later, and it cracked through that 262,000 share seller that was out there at 8. However, it was a false breakout. What happens when a stock breaks resistance and it can't hold over it as support? What happens when a stock breaks over resistance and sellers immediately start selling more to put on top of the order book, to put on top of what's already out there? So that's where at least you can't kick your feet back and just assume once it breaks resistance, instantly it's just going to go up higher. You have to at least keep your eye on the ball and make sure it does what it needs to do. Higher lows and higher highs, right? So that's where even you could tell from yesterday, as we'll get to live in just a bit, and from yesterday, I'll pull up my actual Bookmap, but it broke over 8 and shook around it here for a little while. We'll look at where it's at now. So point being is that we did have resistance show up at $8, and it broke over it, don't get me wrong, but at first it was a rejection. It came back down pretty quick, right? Now, not as Bookmap centric here, what I'm about to share, but if you're familiar with gaps and gap fills, Bookmap really does show this very well, because if you look at the end of every day, you're going to see a pretty big volume dot at the end of every given single day for the stocks that you trade. So at the end of this candle here, at the end of the day, the close price, this was at $5.52. I'd put my life on it, guarantee that, there was a pretty big volume dot right there at that price, exactly $5.52. Why is that important? Because this, well, of course, filled the gap just in terms of the, gap overnight, but it's because of that big volume that got filled right at the end of that day at 552. Well, that flipped it into support beautifully, pushed back up. Now that takes me to yesterday, that takes me to today, and we'll show my live Bookmap screen now finally with that. Just wanted to kind of, give you a little prequel to our story here. But, with that in mind, once again, yesterday it moved up, 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 up. Now, normally for any day trading type of stock, regardless of a swing trade, just with a day trade type of move, for as much as this already ran, you should expect to have resistance hold it first. So did it just break resistance and fly right away? No, it took a little bit. It took about like an hour, hour and a half. And at first it did pull back below it. But that's just where I'll point out, the more that it keeps poking and testing that exact level, especially in a smaller, series of time, span of time, with a day trade, this is perfect. With a swing trade, hey, that's probably going to require a couple of days, multiple daily candles to see this nip and test that resistance. If we want to see true continuation off of that price now, let's see it sooner than later. So that just leaves me to today where, well, it pulled back, dropped off at first, but it regained composure and obviously it rebroke over 8 one more time. Well, hey, I think this is the point now where we're going to see that larger run. The more it keeps poking it, especially day to day, if not day to day, then just across a series of minutes like that, very bullish. So right now, this is the IBRX. This is what we had here from yesterday morning into the afternoon. About 230,000 shares sitting out here at 8. Getting hit. You can see volume bar, and there's other ways that you could tell. Look at the Delta column here, at least. I like to have the CVP Delta enabled, so there's a pretty big difference between the amount of volume that got filled at the ask versus the bid. We'll kind of quantify that as buying pressure at the time. So hey, the more that it keeps doing that, you should be getting that better move. So today, well, broke over $8. Not as if there was much resistance really there today. Hey, what happens the more you keep knocking on a door? You're going to blow right through it. So there doesn't need to be a new line there to at least consider that or acknowledge that as resistance. But that's where otherwise, once it blows over it here, as long as it stays over it, we're in good shape. And at this point now, this is where you start to see these new bids pop up, acting as even further buying pressure just on the order book, just on the limit side here. So over 500,000 shares on the buy side. That might be one of the largest orders I've seen since I started trading this. So why do you think that's there, right? Like, what do you think is the reason for that? Where do we have our resistance here? Where did we have a resistance a month ago, January 16th? $10, right? Isn't that where I was showing it from the beginning? So at this point now, the more that we could at least stay over 8 and push off that, and we have different signs of buying pressure, whether it be different resistance levels getting blown through, or whether it be having stacks of bids pop up like this, especially closer to where it's trading at. Oh, that's incredible. So I feel pretty convinced right now, as long as we just keep kind of laying over 8 day to day, week to week, we'll eventually get to 10. Now, I say that very loosely speaking. How strong is this news really? Where I talked to you about, Anktiva, their drug that's treating 2 separate types of cancer. They got Saudi FDA approval. The reason they popped yesterday was actually because they got more approval across 33 different countries in the European Commission. Is this news really that good? Right? So who knows? Maybe it can get the job done by the end of the day today. It's only 2:16 Eastern right now, so got about an hour and 45 to go, but the stars are lining up here, right? Now, for anyone here on Discord right now, if you have any questions regarding this one trade, the IBRX, great to see Jacob here. You got Moto, Mike. I'm a bit of a Moto mouth myself there, so great to see you, Mike, Patrick. You got Happy Future. You got Dude, who I've seen here before. Great to have you. And if you have any questions, folks, let me know here in Discord chat. Otherwise, on social, on YouTube. But I do want to go over another trade at least because I've been on here numerous times. I'm so grateful to be on this platform for, Dan, Steven, Bruce, all of them over at Bookmap. And I'm not always hitting them perfectly. I'm not always right. You know what I mean? So none of us really are. But I just want to point out, when the last time I was on here, I was going over, I believe, this trade Figma because, I was doing the same thing I was doing with IBRX. I was going over some Twitter posts I had there, some receipts. So I want to show you what happened to the stock FIG. What happens when it doesn't work out, right? Now, to recap you on this one trade, I'm going to delete a bunch of lines here first. To recap you on this trade, Figma, if you're not familiar with FIG, Figma here, they're known as a huge AI company, and they were led to believe as a huge competitor to Adobe. So if you're familiar with Adobe, Photoshop and all of that from forever. They've been around forever at this point. Figma apparently is a direct competitor. So they had a lot of hype on them going into their IPO. People thought they're going to take off, go crazy. Well, at least back in August like 7th or the 17th, just early on, right here, it was the 7th. But I showed this the last time I was on this very platform, where I said to you, like, this is getting awfully close. I think there's a chance we're going to see this bounce right from 33, from 35. I had these 200,000+ share bids. Now, these were here for a long time, but they weren't here forever. Those orders eventually got pulled from the book. But for as long as they were there, I felt pretty damn confident that, you know what, let's at least take the trade. And if it goes, it goes. If it makes lower highs, well, we go, meaning we get out. If it makes lower highs, probably going to make a lower low, right? Just want to point that out. Now, that's where at least we happen to have this kind of move off support, it's trying. There's a chance. I had a chance to make some money there, but if it's not popping and making a higher high, as long as I'm not losing money on the trade, as long as I'm not taking a severe loss. So it pulled back. I tried to give it some slack down to like 33. I cut my ties with it, though, right away after. So you're not always going to hit them right. But that is, though, where I just want to point out, with the IBRX, hey, where we had resistance at $10, as long as we're seeing higher lows, I'm led to believe there's a reason why we had that iceberg order out there 1 month ago at $10. Much like back in August of last year, I thought there was a reason why we had these big icebergs at 33 and 35 when this was trading at 78. You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't happen too often. So where you have the IBRX, and that's kind of like showing huge resistance at 10, well, that's today, but that was also there a month ago. So the way that I like to teach this, it's true. Like, hey, we're human beings at the end of the day, folks, and I'm sure mostly, if not all of us, grown adult human beings and professionals. Well, we got to put ourselves in the shoes of like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, and we got to ask the question, why? Right? You ever get that from like, your son, your daughter growing up, like, why? Well, you know what? We got to put ourselves in those shoes. Why was that order out there a month ago? Hey, the stock's still making higher lows on the daily chart. Broke out here, obviously. Well, why is that order out there? Odds are it's a target, and it has been from the jump. So at least for right now, I'm going to hang into this trade at least up until 10. Who knows if it breaks over 10? Let's have a little fun. I haven't really done this yet. I haven't really went this far ahead yet, but what's after 10? Not much, but maybe you could say 12. Maybe you could say 15, right? And there could always be something new that pops up, like we did have at 8. Remember, that order at $8 popped up like a few days later or a week later. So, there could always be something new that shows. Just always keep your eyes on Bookmap, and you'll find out. You'll have your answer. Now, with that said, just to jump back to Figma here, because you might think like, okay, well, it actually is pushing up here today. They've had good earnings last night even, so they're trying to go up. They actually announced a nice little deal. If you're into the news, they did announce a nice little deal with this company, Anthropic. Okay, is there a reason to try and swing trade Figma, though? Where do we have support? 23.25. There was something right here at 22.50 yesterday. I wanted to have this drop into this 22.50 going into the after hours yesterday, and it just popped. So I missed the move altogether. But otherwise, the longer this just kind of consolidates and makes lower highs, I'm thinking there's a chance it's either going to come down to one of these two. As long as this stays out here, we'll go with this first at 23.25 or so. But there's a reason why this was out here, and this is even a larger order, about 67,000 put all together. So I'm going to be a little patient on this trade. Just because I tried it back here in late November, it doesn't mean I need to try it again. I tried it because we had iceberg showing back in August at these prices. So that's more of an anomaly. That's more of like a rare pattern that you really don't find too frequent on Bookmap, especially on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, as those orders were out there. Now, though, when you look at just the naked chart without Bookmap, listen, I love Bookmap, and I really use it for every trade I take. For the last 7+ years, I have. But you don't need Bookmap to answer this. This stock is making lower highs, and it's been making lower lows from the jump. When a stock is making lower highs and lower lows, the buyers are not winning the battle. So this might be the first day where it's even trying to break a local higher high, but the key word there is local. It's probably going to require time to see this truly develop into a support. And listen, if it pops sooner, then that's fine, because at least I'll be more patient from then and wait to see new support build, maybe from a higher price like 28. But point being is that for a chart like this is not something that you would traditionally want to try and swing trade. IBRX, well, hey, when I jumped in at 3, was it really that healthy of a graph? Bookmap aside and news aside? Doesn't look like it, right? Doesn't look like it was so healthy, at least from that point of view. Lower highs, and it was kind of dragging down for a while there. But when you have this zoomed in a bit, this is where it does start. So it did break over 3, 290-ish, $3 pretty much right there. And as long as it can try and flip that into a support over time, then game on. But this was building out for a much longer amount of time here, for months, at least comparative to Figma. This is just a week worth. So I'm not convinced on this at all yet, if you're just kind of asking. Steven, there we go, asking if I can go over Apple. That was actually part of my lineup at some point here. So hey, let me just say, Figma is an AI stock, at least, right? Now, AI has been the rave over the last year and a half, but really it's gone crazy. So let me ask here, going to have a little fun right now. Hey, let me know, folks. Even if you haven't heard of it, just write no in the chat. But for Happy Future, Armando, Cathal, we got a lot of us in Discord right now. Have you ever heard of what's called OpenClaw? Anyone here familiar with OpenClaw yet? Anyone here know of what's called OpenClaw? It's a program. It's an AI. I don't even know how to describe it other than that. There's probably a lot more people sharper than me on that. But Dan says he's not heard of that himself. Dude hasn't. Steven hasn't. All right. Well, if you've watched Iron Man, you know Jarvis, right? Like the superhero Iron Man. Well, you know Jarvis? Well, think of Jarvis for our computers. Yep, it's happening. Now, with that, Steven's asking if I can go over Apple because, well, hey, for me, the reason that we were focused on Apple earlier this week, they started to make a little pop back up. This is the Tuesday candle, right? So to begin the week, they did try and recover. The reason I'm led to believe they had popped Tuesday morning out the gate, and this is just my opinion, so, different strokes for different folks. It's all good, but so many people are going out now to get these Mac computers, the Mac Minis, the Mac Studios, which are like $10,000 a bone. So with that, that's like one of the main computers that can drive this program, OpenClaw. So I'll tell you what, I made a rookie mistake. I could have went to get a Mac Mini over this past weekend. Like I saw it available in Tampa, mall, whatever. I bailed. I said, you know what, I'm not going to go. I'll wait a little bit. Let me do some research, whatever. I already did enough, but I kind of chickened out. You know what I mean? You don't want to drop $1,000 on a computer and then you realize it's not worth it, whatever. Guys, I should have bought that computer because I checked the next day, which was just on Monday or on Tuesday, whenever it was. And now they're not available until March 17th. So that's not just in Tampa, that's in Long Island, New York. That's pretty much in most areas. So, I mean, they've gone and bought them all out, I think. So with that, Apple stock should make a pretty good move just based on consumerism, right? Now, to answer Steven's question in full, can you go over Apple? Curious what your read is on it. Well, absolutely we can, just in the sense of Bookmap and just regular charting. So Apple's a little tough with the chart because it's gone up so much. that when there's any drawback like we had here from December into end of Jan, much like when we see a stock break a support level, it's probably going to take time for that new support to develop. Time, right? So that includes days, that includes weeks. So at least over time here, we are starting to see higher lows from this stage. We've definitely built a solidified area of resistance around that 280-ish to 85-ish or so. But that's just basic charting 101. When we're integrating Bookmap into it, I'll tell you what, I don't know if there was a data server issue this morning with Bookmap. I had a little hiccup this morning on my Bookmap here at least. So I'll mention that, but I want to go over what we had here on the 17th back from Tuesday. So Apple ended up making a couple of breaks over resistance here. 262 and change. Nice CVP node right here. So that's something I'll put a big focal point on myself. Either way, with higher lows, pop, you get the higher high. So when this ran about 3-4 points, I felt pretty convinced, okay, I think that my thought of consumerism, people rushing out to get these, Mac minis, and I apologize in advance for already telling people here about OpenClaw. You're probably going to take hours now to research this stuff. So my apologies there for taking up your time now. But with that, hey, to have this breakout, I felt pretty good that we would happen to see higher lows continue, at least to get an eventual higher high later on throughout the week. So what gives? What happened? I didn't take a trade on Apple up until this morning at least, but otherwise yesterday, hey, this is excellent here. Shook down at first, it's a little droopy here to begin. It is holding around that 262 and 30 cents, 262 and 50. So that level from the day prior, like we had said, hey, that actually flipped pretty well into a support, right? Didn't we just say that CVP node, that volume spike right there? And you got those icebergs that ripped over too, just kind of all of them combined. Well, the next day, that actually created some pretty good support as this bottomed out in the morning. And then as it was pushing back up, oh, check this. You had these 2 or maybe even 3 different buy orders here. The orders that you see on Apple aren't going to be as big as you would see on, obviously IBRX, cheaper stock. NVIDIA might have larger float perhaps and larger amount of shares outstanding, so perhaps larger size that NVIDIA would have. But when you look at the red color, I mean, that's maxed out in terms of just relativity, volume relativity. So something like that's going to be larger than what we have here at 265 on the sell side. This is all for about 11,000 shares. By the time these showed up, well, they're larger, so they're going to become that darker red hue, and it's kind of going to water down, so to say, some of these other orders. Now, I like that. That's a good thing because it shows the significance of these orders here. Yeah, it's 20,000. For NVIDIA, maybe a true iceberg or something that is massive that can create support, you would see maybe 80,000, 100,000, right? That's fine. But when you see at least that darker red pop up on Bookmap, for this stock, for this time of the day right now, this is absolutely key support. So it did make a strong move up. It eventually broke over resistance at that 265, and well, things were looking incredible then, right? Now we ended up having a nice little pullback going into the close yesterday, and then obviously here today pulled back a little bit lower. We're down towards 261 now. We broke that support from 262, 262.35-ish. What's up with the market right now? A little pullback here today. I mean, we were dropping off a little bit, making a lower high now, so to say. So if this is the beginning of more just market sell-off, it's going to be tough for any trade to at least stay afloat for the time being. So Apple, of all things, being a Mag 7, it's likely going to pull back, right? Comparative to where it started back on Tuesday this week, it's still doing pretty good, especially where you think about the open price from Tuesday of this week, because much like we talked about with the close at the market open, you're going to see a pretty big transaction pop up on time and sales. It's going to be a big volume dot on Bookmap. So pretty much where I have my cursor, I'd say if it breaks that, yeah, then it's probably in some rough shape. And it's still making higher lows even if it were to nip below this line. But altogether, I mean, if the AI rush and if that news behind like the AI, the open claw, if it's as good as you'd think, then it should at least hold. And maybe when the markets aren't bouncing back up yet, it might show some better relief and might start to go up as the markets still consolidate. That's a pretty good sign for what would come if the markets eventually do bounce back up, and not if, when the markets eventually bounce back up, no, you would see Apple make a much sharper breakout at that point. What's interesting to me, I'm sure there's like triple witching that's involved here, but especially with Bookmap, again, those volume dots are so important because they'll tell the tale between buying and selling going into the next day. For something like this, though, my guess is that this could have been like triple witching, whatever, like huge volume spike here on this one candle. Why? You know, this candle here barely traded really much at all here, up and down. This is back from December 19th. I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. I could be wrong on this. We're just going to have a little fun here for the time being. But look at the close price from this day, December 19th. Just giant volume candle. Stock didn't even move that much. So what gives? Like, why was there so much volume traded that day? Again, it could have been like an options expiration thing. But otherwise, that closing price, 273.67. All right, well, it ended up trying to come back up and above it here going back into February. It rejected it here by the end of the year. So it is going to take time for that to build out as support. So it doesn't shock me to have this drop from last week here. If it's not going to stay over it, it will reject. If you want to see real growth on Apple going into this year, and I'm just shooting from the hip from this one spike, but for as big volume as that is, and if Apple is going to eventually make a higher high, then you want it to at least stay over this here coming up, this closed price from this candle. It tried to do that going into February, but if it's not going to run from it, it's going to reject. It's not just going to freeze there for days and weeks at a time. So otherwise, it did reject. Now, it's probably going to take a while for it to even try and go back up there. But once it can get back up and above that price there, that big volume spike, I'd expect a much cleaner move up to 300 plus. That's my shoot from the hip thought, right? You know, there's a lot of ways that you can cut a pizza pie, right? So for anyone that uses other parts of Bookmap that I may not have shown here so far, as long as you're using those parts the right way, you're probably going to enjoy your trade, right? For anyone here that uses indicators, you know, moving averages, RSI, MACD, hey, you know, I don't focus on those as much with day trading. With swing trading, different story. You know, when I have the time to play with that stuff, I'll do it. With day trading, I don't really have the time to do that. So in the mornings, I'm not really as focused there as much as I am with Bookmap. But you know, if there's something that helps you out with indicators, right? As long as you're using it the right way. Stephen asking, do you do options too with being a stock trader? Just wondering. Oh yeah, absolutely. Now the key with that is this. I want to mention, if you are a new trader, I'm speaking to you only coming up. So if you're just joining us right now on Bookmap, and if you're a new trader, I'm speaking to you only. A lot of people go to options because it's cheaper, because it's less expensive to buy the contract compared to buying the equity. Now, also with that, you could leverage the options even nicer, much better, in fact, if you catch it right place, right time. So when you see people on social media, like on X, which is a cesspool to begin with, you start seeing people post like, oh, I made 1,000%, follow me. It's like, okay, like come on. You don't do that all the time. It's not every day. And with those wins come giant losses. There's huge risk involved. So if you're a new trader joining this webinar, if you're interested in Bookmap, you should learn how to trade the stock first before you go into options. Now, if you already make money consistently with trading options, I wasn't speaking to you just there. So if you already make money trading options, then please keep doing everything you're doing, right? If you're making money consistently, then stick with it. But though it is true, it's the underlying movement of the common that affects the premium that you're paying for the put or call. Now, with that said, my tips with trading the options, if you're using Bookmap and if you're trying to trade it alongside the stock, I would say, and again, everyone's going to have differences, it's going to lower the potential reward, but you do want to lower the IV, lower the implied volatility, because there might be a point where a stock is approaching support. You might have, Apple approaching that 260 iceberg. But if your contract is like the 0 DTE, or if it expires tomorrow, I bet you that implied volatility was going to be much higher. So if this is approaching support, who knows, your premium might be plunging down 12, 25, 30% already, and this hasn't even tested the iceberg on the bid, right? So the first step with this would be to lower the implied volatility. And the way to do that would really be to push the expiration date a little further out, a couple weeks, a month, couple months, whatever. The more out you feel safer with, the better. Now, otherwise, though, I don't really do too out of the money stuff. For anyone here, like if you were to buy option puts for Apple here, if you think it's going to break below 260, okay, that could be a viable, good day trade to try and buy the option on, to buy the puts. But I wouldn't do like the 250 strike. Pretty far out of the money right now. So if it's going to be further out of the money, that IV is going to be jacked up there, and at least it makes it more difficult for you to trade. So otherwise, lower the IV, lower the strike price, make it more in the money or right slightly out of the money. If you do like maybe 250, 750 strike on Apple puts once it breaks below 260, sounds like a pretty fair idea to me, at least better than going crazy out of the money at like 250. Now, with that, though, if you are a new trader, you don't need to trade options just because, if the stock is too expensive for you, I get it. If you don't want to pay $260 a share for Apple, I get it. So that might leave you to say, well, I have to trade the option then, right? Not right. That's wrong, especially more now than ever. So there has been an abundance of these single stock ETFs. Hey, I bet you could trade $30.28 a share AAPU. This is a double leveraged single stock ETF that is based right off of Apple. So it's not one-to-one because it's double leveraged. If Apple's down 1.3%, this is down 2.64. So you have to handle the volatility still, but you could trade this a lot closer in relation to the stock, where if you're basing your entries and exits off of the limit orders that are out there on Bookmap, those larger orders, I call them icebergs, but just to say those larger orders, well, that's where once that level breaks, you could instantly try and play the ETF. Try and give you a better example here for right now, just because it looks like the SPY is near the low of the day right now. It looks like we're probably going to drop a bit. Dan, you knew I wouldn't go a webinar without discussing Bitcoin, right? I knew you knew. So no, of course though. Bitcoin, we've been talking about a bit anytime I've had the chance to jump on Bookmap. But otherwise though, I figure if we're going to see Bitcoin crash bad and drop, I don't know, I was thinking maybe like MSTR would pull back. MicroStrategy, if this just tanks right now. Now I'm coming to this because, well, there's plenty of different ETFs that are based off of MicroStrategy. If you find that $126 stock MSTR is too expensive for you, you have MSTU. I bet you could trade $4.73 a share MSTU. Now this goes with MSTR. So if MSTR pops, this pops. If MSTR drops, this drops. All right, well, hey, you might tell me, hey, Josh, I can't short. That's why I trade options. I can't short. If the market drops, I can't short. I'm in a cash account, so I'll buy puts instead. Well, I'll tell you what. You could actually buy the inverse ETF. Stephen asking, what is MSTU? MSTU is an ETF. It's a complete derivative off of MicroStrategy. There's an ETF company that issues this out to begin with. So this company is T-Rex, whatever that means. T-Rex is the name of the company that issues out this one ETF. And that company has ETFs, I'm sure, for NVIDIA, for Tesla, for a lot of the larger cap stocks. If you're familiar with a mining company by the name of IREN, this is an ETF for IREN. This is another company, though, Defiance, not T-Rex. But let's go back to MSTR. Well, you got this ETF that goes with it. So if MSTR pops, then this would pop. But if MSTR drops, then there is an inverse ETF, and you could buy that as the common drops. As the common falls off, you could buy this, and it will go completely inverse. All right, real quick, just trying to catch up with the chat right now, and if anyone has any follow-ups, at least regarding options, Apple, Bitcoin will perhaps pop to it a bit more there. But question from Dude, at least I just saw there. Do I happen to use the CVD? I believe cumulative volume delta, if my memory serves me correct. But right down here, right? I personally do not. And that's all right. There's a lot of incredible tools on Bookmap, and if I had the chance to show every tool I even do use, I'd probably go way into like after 4 o'clock. So, otherwise, there are other things I'll poke at. For example, the CVP column, like I'd mentioned earlier, I pretty much always show this. If I ever want to see the true difference between the buying and the selling per price, I can flip that delta box enabled, kind of do that. I'll toggle the volume dots a lot, kind of to just get a decent amount of them on my screen, not even too many. Bruce showed me how to do this a long while ago, years and years and years ago, when he was over at our Trader Summit event in Long Island. So you'll play with this number a little bit with the volume dots. Like I like to, it should have been 50,000. And even that 50,000 doesn't show anything. So I'll have to play with this number a little bit to get a specific amount, like 3 or 5 on there. I don't like having too many. There we go. So you could tell right here, at least, you don't have too many of these green or red dots, and that's all right. Some people like having a bunch. I don't like having too many because it makes it a little bit easier for me to focus on other instruments here on Bookmap that I do happen to use. So it just goes to show, well, obviously we did have an order on the bid here at 263 today for Apple, but you could tell it got hit. You know that for a fact. You know that because of A, volume bar. You know that because of B, volume spike on the right, that's CVP. And if I were to enable that delta box, bingo, right? But then otherwise, look at this red dot. You know that at $263, in one shot, 42,800 shares got filled. So definitively, I know that this is like the largest print on the day today for Apple. At least, after the market opened up, that's been the largest print across the day. Well, at CTU, at Cyber Trading University, we nickname that red as aggressive selling pressure. Right? And you probably get that from you folks over here at Bookmap, Bruce, right? So just to say, for as much aggressive selling pressure as we are seeing, the more times this is crashing into this, even if it's holding for a little bit, even if it's like holding at first, if it's hitting it, it's showing selling interest. And from there, it's going to break. So if you want to know why this dropped off so severely today, it's mainly because of the selling pressure that kicked in at that 263. But to go back to Dude's question there, I don't focus on the CVD as much just because, listen, I say it jokingly, but I also say it somewhat seriously. And I say it seriously because, well, it's true. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room to make money. And I'm certainly not the smartest person in this room. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm not the brightest bulb of this bunch. So that's just where, hey, when you happen to have a lot of different things on this screen, my key behind being a good trader is just not being overwhelmed. You don't want to have too much on the screen. right? If I had every single tool that Bookmap had to offer on this screen, I think my head would explode faster than my computer would. You know what I mean? So that's just where I say, have as much as you want on there, but to your extent. So just for me, I like the CVD. There's good use in it, but it might take away from other parts that I do want to focus on, right? Now, on the other side of that spectrum, because Stephen made it, less is more, right? But you don't want to only have just one tool of Bookmap on here, and that's it. If I didn't have the CVP column, if I didn't have the volume dots, if I didn't have the COB column, perhaps, or if I just didn't have the numbers maybe showing, that doesn't really give me all of the pieces of the puzzle that I could and should use. So you do want to use a few different pieces of this put together, but just keep it simple, right? Keep it lean and mean. Oof, I like that line, Stephen. There you go. I never heard that before, so I'm going to steal that from you. I'll credit you at least the next time I say it, but trust me. All right, folks, hey, we are going to finish up at least in the next few minutes. I'd like to invite all of us here directly to our live trading room in just a moment, but before I finish up, I'm going to keep the screen up here. Does anyone have any remaining questions or trades, anything alike that you want to go over at least before we wrap? Check out Bitcoin at least here and get a sense of where we have our limit orders right now on the book, but we know where real support is. We know where a real big support is because it's not even actually at 60,000. It's actually the combination. Check. And this is where with Bookmap here, I can turn the lights on a little bit more, but otherwise right at 58,000, about 300 Bitcoin there in lieu of this at the 60,000. Like that combination, I think is just only a couple thousand points off from one another. Would not shock me to have another massive sweep down there and just to scoop up more liquidations before it bounces. Otherwise, not much really to write home about with Bitcoin outside of that. 65 technically is your next support, but otherwise, there really isn't much to write home about. It's just been in chop for a little while. So it's just a matter of kind of saying with lower highs, it's just bound to happen. You're going to get lower lows. Let's just say for reference, if Bitcoin does break this low right here, this wick, that basically is 65,000, right? So you know what? Hey, if it breaks that low, which means it's going to break this, then yeah, 1 + 1 indeed equals 2. Meaning that if it breaks this, it's very likely going to drop down to this next, right? We don't need to overcomplicate things. We got to keep things, in fact, even more simple than anything else. All right, folks. Hey, let me know if any last questions coming in. If anything, I will just jump ahead, though. I'd like to invite all of us here directly to our live trading room, hosted by the great Fausto Pugliese. He's a 36+ year pro professional trader. I've been with him for the last 12+ years myself. I never thought I'd be a trader, let alone a teacher, an orator of stocks, and have the chance to be on this platform here. So, first, before anything, once again, thank you so much to Bruce, Dan, Steve, all of our members here at Bookmap, and all of our attendees here too. Jacob, Aaron, you got Armando, Roxy, Dude. We got No Bull joining us here. Is the live trading room free for viewing as well? First time sitting in, very cool. Appreciate the kind words, my friend. Thank you so much. We do invite you to join us. Very low cost, one-time cost, no commitment afterwards, $9. So I'll link you to that here in just 1 second. So just going to go over some quick details there. It's a week-long membership. I do a live workshop there every Tuesday. So if you join today, you'll have a full week. But I do a live workshop there every Tuesday that you'll have access to. We do broadcasts every day, Monday to Friday in the morning and the afternoon. Actually, right now, my colleague Rich will be jumping on in just a few minutes there. And just trading the afternoons, the mornings all together. We have watch lists, both times of the day as well. Constant customer support and service, much like Bookmap does have here as well. I can't stress enough. I'll send emails to you guys over at Bookmap It'll be like at like 5 in the morning here, because I know they are global. So there's actually someone responding back within a matter of minutes. You know, Sandra, someone else at least just earlier, I think Alex maybe, just great support over at Bookmap. You need to have good support to be a reputable company. So that's what we pride ourselves on. Elena, yes, that's exactly it, Stephen. My apologies. I'm normally good with names. I'm just dyslexic otherwise. So Elena, that's right, and Sandra. So with that said, though, hey, our link is right there, ctu.co/trial. I'll show you a couple more slides as we wrap up, but scan that QR code, though, as well, no bulls. Scan the QR code or go to the link, either or. So there's Fausto, there's myself, and then my colleague, Rich. He's great with IT, tech support, one of our chat moderators there with us. Obviously, we have our trading room. And with that, everything all together is what you'll be getting for about $9. Cup of coffee. I don't know, maybe a Starbucks is more than $9 now. I might have to update that, inflation, right? No, but seriously though, I appreciate everybody here. Thank you so much for joining us.